G'day, Michael here. This is the latest addition to my workshop. It's actually a thicknesser that processes both sides of the timber at the same time. It's kind of like having a jointer. Don't know how well that'll show up. Probably doesn't show up very well at all. It's got a cutter block in the bottom with basically an in-feed table, and further in is an equivalent to an out-feed table. But it's a thicknesser, so it's kind of a jointer and a thicknesser at the same time. In a lot of ways it's quite nicely made, but there's a couple of silly little errors with this machine. Basically everything seems fit for purpose, except for some reason this control box was mounted here on this stem. Now it doesn't sound like a problem, but the way it was mounted, there was no way I could open this larger panel without hitting the control box. So the electrician and I have worked together to come up with a solution of mounting the control box on the actual lid with the cabling running back and forth so as to give a movement, if I can lift this up, for the whole lid assembly, and the cabling runs around the outside. It's very hard to do that one-handed. Okay, I might just open that up again. Give me a second. Okay, and now that the I'm going to call it the lid open, the panel is opened up, you can see inside here there's a number of feeder rollers. This one here is obviously the first one that works on, in effect, the in-feed table of the jointer. You can see beneath is the actual cutter block for the jointer section. Then there's two further rollers which are basically completing the process of the jointing of the underside. And then you have the main cutter block, which is here, and it kind of it runs contrary to the jointer part. The lower cutter runs from this perspective clockwise, and the thicknesser part runs from this perspective counterclockwise. At the end of the day, it means that both cutting edges are actually travelling backwards against the timber. So the timber is being fed in from what appears here, the right, toward the left, but the cutters, both top and bottom, are cutting against that timber flow. Okay, now once you've gotten past the cutter, of course, the timber is all smooth, and we want the feeder rollers not to have any teeth so as to damage the parts. So it's got actually, 5 feeder rollers on the top that are powered, and on the bottom, this is now on the rear of the machine. This last roller is just lazy, there's no power to it. But all the rest of the rollers in underneath here are all powered to go with the rest of it. I'll open up the transmission on the side. Okay. You can see here the chain drive connecting the various, the two rear outfeed rollers. These are really in-feed rollers, but there's no connection to power from this side, they're just connected to each other. And you've got the belt travelling up from the main motor to the thicknesser cutter block. And on the other side of the machine, you can see the main power feed arrangement. From power below, various sprockets are being passed with a chain. Now these sprockets here are in the lift, the elevating and lowering thicknesser table, actual main platen, and they're geared from the reverse side of the chain. So you can see the chain goes, that's obviously a tensioner, from one side to the other on the upper rollers. Now, as you remember from the other side, these two were connected together on the other end, and there's another pair of rollers here, as you saw from above. These two are paired together here with a chain, and they're paired on the far side with a chain, but they're actually fed from this end. So here is where the transmission obviously brings from below through to these I'm going to say assisted feeder rollers. They're not really high traction or anything, they're just smooth. And these are the main feeding rollers, but they are paired from there on the opposite ends of the shaft, just sharing around that thrust. Now, another thing that's interesting, on the other thicknesser that I have, there's very little done in the way of kind of a shielding for the extraction. It throws the material clear in a different way. This has a kind of a rotating, I don't know whether it shows very well. I really don't know whether I can demonstrate this. You can see you have the main thicknesser shaft, and you kind of got this housing either side. Very hard to show this. On the other end, you can see, if you look carefully, a spring, and that's a bit of a hint. Maybe I can hold this with the other hand. Let's see how that goes. It's very hard to do this one-handed, so forgive the shakes. Can you see how that rotates? It rotates around. There's no light in here. Very hard to show this. I'm not sure I'll be able to demonstrate this. Anyhow, there's a circular groove in that black block in the background, and this component here runs in that track. You can see. Oh, come on, focus. Very hard to hold this and actuate that. Okay, I hope that shows well enough. It doesn't look very good to me. All right, and there's the top part of the chute. It's got like this rubber flanging which meets down onto these surfaces here. All right, so I'm going to shut this again. Okay, so the lid's closed now. The amount that the underside cuts is obviously determined by the height of this table relative to the cutter block and the outfeed table part of it. There's a scale on the side indicating focus, indicating what's being taken off. These bolts here on the side provide basically a clamping arrangement, and this, I don't know, this drive section here obviously slides the infeed table forward and back on that angled plane there to provide that lift. The control panel is actually quite simple. Up and down, that's the powered lift for the actual thickness of table here, the powered lift for the lower section. Wow, this is hard to drive. So that's the up and down. And this one here is the power for the jointer component, which is the lower cutter block. And this is the main cutter block, which also provides the power for the power feed of the whole unit. And of course, that's the button that makes it stop, and a safety switch. What else we've got going here? Okay, we have the extraction housing on the top, and on the bottom it's a bit more complicated. That's an ovaloid shape. How can we show that? The ovaloid shape is my problem. So to overcome the ovaloid shape on the underside, I've made, well, it's in the printer right now, this, they call it a loft section on a CAD program. Don't know quite why it's called a loft, but there you have it. So the 3D printer is turning out that part, which will convert from that ovaloid extraction outlet to, you know, a round extractor hose. So you can see it's printer's busily producing that part. It's not far off finished now. Well, I hope that's of interest to you. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, ask a question, leave a comment. Bye for now.